Have you ever struggled with how much to charge? You go online and you see these videos and they're talking about CODB and COBG and ASAP and ROI, and you're thinking, well, now I'm more confused than I was before I went to look and find out how much I should charge for my work. Well, there is a ton of complication and misinformation out there, and I am here to set the record straight. Here are 12 myths about how to price your work as a photographer. Hi everybody, I'm Donovan, owner of Donovan Photographics, founder of Masters of the Wall Portrait Seminars, and creator of Peace Through Profit, a website that helps artists to sell their work without selling their soul. Also have a nice Facebook page, Masters of the Wall Portrait, and check us out. Just want to give a little warning before we start. This lesson is not for people who are numbers oriented, the left brainers, the engineers, people who already have this stuff figured out. This is for regular, ordinary photographers who are the right brain creative types. You'll get this. So stay tuned. We're going to do some myths here. All right, let's start with number 1. It is a complicated process. All right? And if you've watched videos and you've heard speakers and you've done the math, you know it's complicated. Those methods that are being taught out there for us photographers are methods that are used in retailing. And in retailing, those methods may work. And they probably do. They're good methods. Some of them are. But they don't apply to a custom service-oriented profession like photography. Pricing your work is not complicated. Number 2, there's a lot of math involved. It's a myth. You know, and I'm not a really good math person, and I know people who run businesses who can't do math at all in photography, and they're doing extremely well, because there shouldn't be a lot of math. It should be you should simplify it. You can simplify it. It doesn't have to be all that crazy math and trying to figure things out and kind of trying to keep track and doing, oh my word, I've seen some systems that you would be spending all of your time doing the systems and you would never have time to photograph anything. Because this is art, the math is really simple. You simply charge enough so that if you ever have to remake anything, you're still making a profit. Okay, does that sound crazy or weird? That's part of my method. This is one little part of it because I want you to kind of start to grasp what I'm talking about. I guarantee everything I do 100%, and so should you. And if a client comes back to you and says, hey, this 30 by 40, I don't like it, then you should be able to reprint it, a different pose, or remake it, and still be running in the black. And black means you're making a profit. Red means you're not. And that's where a lot of us are. Myth number 3. Start with how much you want to make and then work your way backwards through a series of incredibly complicated, I got to figure everything out, numbers and math and subtraction and addition and multiplication. And the charts that I've seen have been insane. I mean, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you will be doing this. And you hire people to do that. Because the CEO doesn't do it, has just no way. The CFO does it, or he has people under them do it. So if you have lots and lots of numbers to take care of, like I said, how are you going to find time to do your photography? This method is actually not a bad method, so just kind of backtrack a little bit here. You kind of start with where you want to be, and then you work your way backwards, but I don't work my way backwards. What I do instead is I recommend simply, well, how much money do you want to make? Pick a number. How much do you think you need to make? Maybe add a little bit to that, okay? And only thing you have to do, rather than working your way backwards through a series of unreasonably complicated steps that never seem to end, what you do is you simply set that as your goal. Here's my goal. I want to make this amount of money this year. All right, it's a goal. Write it down, by the way. That's really important. Write it down, pin it up where you can see it every day, and every day take steps toward that goal. And I believe that what you'll do is you'll start working your way forward toward that goal rather than backward in a very convoluted sequence of steps that will only serve to discourage you. Number 4, you must follow a series of complicated and boring formulas. Do not rely on industry standards. Listening to another teacher's talking about how to price your work, and they're talking about what's the photography standard or industry standard for photographers. Industry standard? Are you serious? Do you want to compete with what our industry is doing? I don't, and neither do you. You don't want to set your goal that low because the average photographer makes about $33,000. What? I have 5 kids to support. I'm not going to do that. That's nuts. Especially living where I live, that wouldn't buy bread for a year, okay? Industry standards are not something that I would recommend that you start off with engaging your business and your pricing. Don't even go there. That's to me, that is, I wish if I could tell everybody in this industry to get away from that concept, I would. I think it's very harmful, my own opinion and my own experience. In fact, as you know, if you've watched some of my videos, you know that I have a lot of my peers are in a certain bracket, and they're all photographers, and they do really well. And if they were part of the industry standard, that would already probably raise it by 50%. It's, just them alone, because what they make in their income is phenomenal. You can make a very good living doing this, but you have to get away from the mindset that you're going to compare yourself to what's supposed to be normal. We don't want normal. Nobody wants normal in this business. That'll make you'll starve to death, okay? Now, I've been in business for 40 years. I have taken tons of classes in finance, business, pricing, doing all the complicated stuff. And do you know what I found? I found that it doesn't really work for photography. It applies to retail businesses, and this is what people teach out there in general. If you go to a college or you go to some other learning environment, generally they'll be teaching you retailing, and this is not retailing. That's the first thing you have to get into your head, and that should have been one of the myths, is that photography is retailing, because it's not. It's handled very, very differently, and we're going to go into that just a little bit more. Myth number 5. If you're starting out, you should compare your prices to what other photographers in your area are charging. When I was first starting out in my business, that's what I did. I just took a retail price list from one of the retail photographers out there that had a volume business. And I thought, well, I can compete with them. I can just charge what they charge and people will come to me. I almost lost my shirt. In fact, I probably did. I lost a few pounds, I'll tell you that, because working with somebody else's price list when I don't know their system and I don't have the volume that they have, nothing I did was like what they were doing, except that I had a camera and they had cameras. Other than that, it was completely different. Don't copy other people's price lists. You don't want to compare yourself, again, as we talked a minute ago, with other photographers. Here's a question you have to ask yourself. Go back to myth number 3. How much do you want to make? Okay, that's your goal. Compare that not to what other photographers are making. And don't compare, if you want to compare your income to anything, for me, I was comparing my income to what my doctor made, to what my attorney made, what other professionals were making. Take your business seriously. If you're going to set goals, which I recommend that you do, back at number 3 again, set that goal, set it just slightly out of reach, but not out of sight. Make it a real goal, and you'll be surprised at how far you can go in actually making that goal. But don't compare yourself with photographers. And in fact, if you start making some money and you look at other photographers and go, I'm making more than they are, don't even do that. Just simply compete against yourself. Compete against maybe your attorney or like somebody else in a profession that you respect that makes way, way more than the average photographer does. Okay, so set your sights high, have a friendly competition with yourself, always do your best, and see if you can beat last month's totals, last quarter's totals, last year's totals. There's your competition. That's who you want to compete against, and that's who you want to beat. It's not them, it's you. Myth number 6 is relying on demographics, or as the term goes, how much the market will bear. Oh my goodness, I've heard that so many times. Well, the market won't bear that. What are you talking about? Yes, I know it's what everybody says, and this one is one of my, probably the pet peeve. The one that is the worst thing that can hold you back as a photographer from ever accomplishing what you were placed on this earth to do, is looking at what the market will bear. Now, this goes completely against what almost everybody else teaches out there, but I'll tell you what I've discovered, and I'll tell you what my peers will tell you the same thing. It's not a matter of what the market will bear. Maybe there is a point, okay? I don't know what that is. How high is too high? I don't know. How low is too low? I tell you what, I can tell you that if something is too low, people won't buy it because they won't trust it. That's cheaper than I can make it for. How can they sell it for that? I don't trust it. They just don't. It can't be very good if it's that cheap. Then there are some people, then there always will be, that will look at it and go, wow, that's really cheap. I'll get that. And then they're disappointed. They're the worst complainers, by the way. The cheaper you are, the more complainers you're bound to get. But that myth, number 6, of what the market will bear is just, it's a killer. It kills your drive, and it kills your inspiration, and it can kill your passion. I have been pricing my work up and up and up over the years, and I have not found a spot yet where it's too much, where there's no market for it. There's a market for everything, and I'll give you some clues. Okay, you ready for this? If you don't believe me, and you don't have to believe me, okay, but do this. Go in to your own town, your own neighborhood, and start looking at what people own. Search your area and look for a house that costs more than yours, cars that cost more than yours, restaurants that you just can't afford to go to. Now, if you have any of that in your town, that means there are people out there with a whole lot more money than you have. And that's the key right there, is you have to realize that what you're going to be charging isn't geared towards you. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about those clients that are out there. Those demographics exist in every marketplace. It's amazing. I went into a small town to meet with another photographer, somebody I've been working with for years and years and years. Very good, way better than me. And this person said, I can't charge any more than X amount of dollars for this because people around here just can't afford it. It's a small community. People don't have a lot of money here. I went out to his studio parking lot, and parked in his studio parking lot was a very, very expensive car. Now, what was that expensive car doing in an area that was financially depressed, where nobody can afford anything? That's in his head. It was him who was thinking that. It wasn't his market. It wasn't the clients. The potential was there, and he never tapped into it. And that's happened more than once in my business. I've talked to so many photographers. One in particular, famous, toured all over the world. She was telling me she was top in her market, gave me a number. She says, nobody in my market can possibly charge more than that. I am probably double what everybody else is charging. I asked her where she lived, where she had her studio, and it was in the same market as one of my students and friends, who was almost three times what she was charging. So remember, it's crucial. Doesn't matter how many formulas that you do, how much math you do, how many hours you spend figuring out your ROI versus CODB. If you don't have a correct attitude about money and the market that you want to serve, then none of that is going to matter. You're still going to have a very difficult time getting your prices to where they should be. Myth number 7, your lab prices are important in figuring your portrait prices. Wrong. Lab prices have very little to do with what I charge for my portraits. The only thing I take into consideration, as far as my lab goes, is if I had to remake this portrait, could I still make a profit? So if I had to do it twice at my own expense, would I still be making a profit? that's my gauge, okay, and that's where I use my lab pricing. If your lab offers you a discount, by the way, do not discount the portrait to the client. Don't pass that on, because it'll never come out right. Okay, just trust me on this. If you don't want to do the math, if you want to do it, go ahead and figure it out. But it doesn't really calculate out, because if your lab is saving you 10% or 20 or 30, even 50%, let's say your 8x10 is $10, let's say, and they say, we're doing all 8x10s for 50% off. Now they're only $5. Hey, I'll give my clients 50% off, right? Makes sense? Not at all. That's a whole nother number. So yeah, sorry, sidetrack there. Another myth. Don't discount based on your lab prices, and don't price your work based on your lab prices. That's number 7. Myth number 8. Cost of goods sold. If you're doing retailing again, great, do that. But we're not retail providers. We don't do retail. We're artists. It's a whole completely different thing. So what in the world does retail have to do with art again, okay? So don't base your prices off of cost of goods sold, all the things that go into making a portrait, all the things that go into providing the client the good service. We are service providers. That's what you do. You provide a service to your clients. And that's what you base your price off of. I charge for the incredible service that I provide. The portraits are almost a byproduct of that. Myth number 9. Basing your price off of CODB, or cost of doing business, again, has very little to do with what you charge for being an artist. Myth number 10, volume or quantity discounts. Hey, if you buy 2 8x10s, they'll give you a third one for half price. No! Why? Every image you create is worth what it's worth, no less. What are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, on this next image, because I'm discounting it, I think I'm going to just forget about putting the finish on the front, or maybe I won't mount this one and I can charge less. No, every image you do is, well, for me anyway, it's hand done, but every image that you do is an image that you created. It's you, it's part of you, it is something that's valuable to them. It doesn't get cheaper just because you're making 100 of them. I have a friend who sold thousands of a particular image and made a lot of money doing it. I'm not talking about discounts just because they're getting a lot. Whether it's 1 or 100 or 1,000, it doesn't matter. Well, you might fudge a little bit on 1,000, but if it's 8x10s at 400 each, anyway, don't discount based on volume. There is a right way to discount. I used to say never discount. I have since changed my mind over the last couple of decades. I discount, but only for a reason, and I think I mentioned that earlier. If it'll bring my client average up a little bit, then I might discount, but never discount to lower the price. Myth number 11, and I just saw this taught recently. They were using, again, retail price scheduling to price out their photography. And I've already beat this to a pulp, but do not use retail price guides or price scheduling to price your photography. Again, you're not retail. If they go down the street to another photographer, are they going to do exactly what you did for them? You're unique. You need to understand that, because you're offering a unique product and something that's not hand or stamped out on a machine day after day. It looks exactly like everyone else's. Then you have the right, the ability, and the obligation to charge appropriately for that kind of art. Customized art, don't forget. Myth number 12, one of my favorites, and that is your digitals just really aren't worth that much, so let's just give them away. Are you kidding? Your digitals are the heart of the art. That is like selling your original or giving your original away. It is everything right there in that digital file. That shows who you are. All the thought, the effort, the talent, the time, and the expertise that you have goes into creating that image. And that's worth something. It is your lifeblood. It's like selling your negatives. Once they own it, they never have to come to you again. So, you want repeat clients? My suggestion is don't sell your negatives. Don't sell your digital files unless it's something that can make you a whole lot of money. And how do you price digital files? I'll go into that in another episode. And if you must sell digital files, here's how you do it. I'm going to give you a little bonus here, okay? Myth number 12. If you're going to sell your digital files, go back and look over your records and find out what the most you've ever gotten from a client, money-wise, from one file or one negative. If you sold a file and they bought 58 by 10s and a 30 by 40 and they spent $10,000 or $20,000, that is now the price of one file, because that is, you have established the worth of one file. That's what your file's worth. Keep that in mind. If you've sold something for $1,000 or $10,000 from one file, that is the price of the file. It's been established. There's no argument over that. Now we now know what it's worth. So that's what you're going to do from now on. All right, I now have a bonus myth for you, number 12 and a half. And that is that nobody in the world will ever pay that much for a picture. Right? I mean, who in the right mind would pay $400 for an 8 by 10? Who would pay $10,000 for a 60-inch portrait? Well, I tell you what, that myth right there is one of the biggest things stopping you from charging what you're actually worth and what is appropriate. Now for this one, you've got to put on your wide-angle lens, because you're viewing your pricing again through this very narrow telephoto lens. You have a very narrow scope. It's all you can see is what's right there in front of you. But when it comes to pricing, having a wide-angle lens when you're looking at it is the best thing that you can do, because now you're seeing not just your own personal demographics or the ones that are on the somewhere else lower down, or now you're seeing the ones that are upper and higher, and you can cater to those people, because now you're seeing demographics that you really weren't aware of before. You're seeing and meeting people who have a whole lot more money than you do, a whole lot more disposable income, or maybe they don't, but they value portraits as much as you do, and I hope you value portraits. If you own some yourself, that shows that you value them. If you don't, go get some done. You need to value the portraits, or your clients will not value them. So yes, people will make that investment. People will spend and invest thousands and thousands of dollars into photography, into your photography, because you believe in it. You can't sell something you don't believe in. If you don't believe that they will, then you're going to be right. You have people today coming into your studio that you're meeting with that have the ability to make an investment beyond what you've ever imagined. They have that ability, and they probably have that desire until they meet you. Then they think, oh, well, it's really cheap, so I won't spend that kind of money. Is that how your clients are perceiving you? I hope not. I hope I'm not talking to you out there. I hope I didn't make anybody mad, but the truth is, we are our own worst enemies. We're the ones who stop people from making the investment. I remember telling somebody one time that they're looking at a 60-inch portrait. I talked her down to a 30 by 40, and it looked tiny on the wall they were putting it on, and the reason is because I was afraid. I was afraid of my own pricing. It was my fault. I ripped her off, basically. She came back to me about 8 years later, 10 years later, and I redid it, and I made it the right size. The family had grown. It was a lot larger. And so the 60-inch was certainly adequate. Maybe a 72 would have been better. But nonetheless, the point is, you're standing in your own way most of the time. Most photographers that I meet have a real issue with money, thinking that nobody will ever spend that much. And the truth is, you won't spend that much. But the fact is, there are people out there who will buy the nice cars, who will go to a nice dinner, who will take vacations in places that I can't afford. And they'll come in and they'll value portraiture, they'll value you and your work, and they'll make that investment. If you believe it and you understand that it's real, it's out there. I know, I experience it. My students experience it, my peers and my friends experience this, and I want you to experience it too. I want you to have orders that are into multi-thousand dollars. And not just for your own benefit, because yes, I want you to experience that because it's fun, but I want your clients to experience it as well. I find that the more you invest in something that you really want, the greater joy that it tends to bring you. Something that's cheap and free is just that. You don't value it as much. Things that cost money are valued a lot more than things that are just dirt cheap. So there's your 12 and a half myths about pricing your work. Now I've included a work taking note sheet now down below. Go ahead and click on it, open it up, take some notes in there, and figure out your pricing plan. If you still have questions about how to price your work, I'll include a link to a video that I've done on how I do my pricing. So you can click on that and see some more. If you've enjoyed this, if you have any comments, please click like and post down below. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to hear your questions and see what you think. So again, thank you for joining me, Donovan Photographics. I'll see you on the next one.